Part 58. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 572. Chapter 569 of the main text volume of Ruyi Little Man, I Want to Be the Emperor. In today's morning court, Emperor Chen ordered all the courtiers to kneel for half an hour, and then summoned several important ministers, including several ministers, individually. While he was arranging everything in the imperial study room, a figure ran in from outside the palace and ran all the way into Shuxiu Palace. Shuxiu Palace is the residence of concubine Shu. In the palace, concubine Shu looked at Zhao Yuan, who was sweating profusely and panting heavily, and said in surprise, "Didn't Yuan go to see the Wang sister today? Why did he come back?" Zhao Yuan looked up at concubine Shu and said loudly, "Concubine, I want to be the emperor." When concubine Shu heard this, she was startled at first, and then her expression changed drastically. She twisted his ears and said angrily, "Who taught you to say this?" "Zhao Yuandao, no one taught me, it was me who wanted to be the emperor." Concubine Shu covered his mouth and said with a dark face, "No, you don't want to." Zhao Yuan covered her mouth and was still whining. Concubine Shu looked aside and said, "Du Wan, go and close the palace door." "Yes, your majesty." The palace maid named Du Wan responded and called the palace maid who was in the palace just now. After closing the palace door, she looked at the two palace maids, her face turned cold, and said, "If any of you dare to speak out about what happened today, you will definitely not be spared lightly." The two palace maids panicked and said, "I don't dare." Naturally, servants like them don't dare to talk about their master's matters. Over the years, countless people have been thrown into ponds or filled up wells because of their lax speech. Their status is so humble that no one will make the decision for them even if they are really flooded with sinking ponds and wells. In Shuxiu Palace, concubine Shu looked at Zhao Yuan and asked, "Why do you want to be the emperor?" "Zhao Yuandao, because I want to marry a sister from the Wang family, a sister from the Zhang family, and a sister from the Bai family. Only when I become the emperor can I marry the three of them back to the palace together." Being an emperor was just to marry three concubines. Concubine Shu felt helpless that she had given birth to such a thing, and asked, "Why do you think that only by becoming an emperor can you marry all three of them back together? Brother Duan Wang, King Kong, Brother Huai and Uncle Fu Wang, they all only have one princess, but my father has." Zhao Yuan thought for a while, then stretched out his fingers to count. After a while, he didn't count them all, so he raised his head and said, "There are so many concubines." King Duankong only had one concubine because they wanted to maintain an image of not being entertained by women in front of everyone. King Fu only had one concubine because he was henpecked, and King Huai only had one concubine because his father-in-law was Yu. General Lin Wei, he dare not accept a concubine, it has nothing to do with whether he is the emperor or not. Concubine Shu looked at Zhao Yuan and said, "Even if you are not the emperor, you can still marry three princesses." Zhao Yuan looked unbelieving, "Really?" Concubine Shu nodded and said, "Really?" Zhao Yuan continued to ask, "Can I marry a sister from the Wang family, a sister from the Zhang family, or a sister from the Bai family without being an emperor?" This is naturally impossible. The granddaughter of the prime minister will not be a concubine, not even a side concubine. Zhang De, a scholar who has passed down poetry and calligraphy to his family, has a scholarly family. How can he wrong the only legitimate daughter of the Zhang family to be a side concubine? The Bai family of the East Gate Guard can with such a daughter, the daughter of the Bai family can be a princess, but her own child is not qualified to be committed to a girl from the Bai family. Concubine Shu looked at Zhao Yuan and thought to herself that this boy is not good at studying, but his eyes are extremely poisonous. None of the little girls he has taken a liking to are ordinary people. However, she still looked at Zhao Yuan and nodded, "Of course. Then I don't want to be a kid anymore." Zhao Yuan turned around without hesitation and ran outside. Concubine Shu caught him in time, knelt down, looked at him, and said solemnly, "You can't say anything like what you did just now to anyone again, including your father." "I understand." Zhao Yun nodded vigorously and said, "I don't even want to be the emperor anymore, so of course I won't tell others." Seeing him running out, concubine Shu let out a long sigh of relief. The road to seizing the heir is so dangerous and life-threatening at every turn. At such a young age, how could he possibly be able to fight against several royal brothers? Chen Huang walked in from outside, looked back and said, "Yuan didn't go out to play today." "I just came back." Concubine Shu shook her head and said helplessly, "This child is getting more and more playful. If he likes to play, let him play." Emperor Chen said nonchalantly, "I don't want him to have any talent for governing the country. There is nothing wrong with being an idle prince from now on." Concubine Shu smiled and changed the subject. "I just heard that something happened in the Golden Palace, and your Majesty was very angry." "I'm not angry at all." Emperor Chen smiled and said, "I'm very happy today. I've never been as happy as I am today since I came to the throne." It's a pity that Concubine Shu didn't see those people being pointed at the nose by me. The scene of scolding, but it was a happy ending, but what that guy wrote was so difficult to remember, I almost forgot the lyrics. Concubine Shu said in surprise, "Which boy?" "Of course it's Tang Ning." Chen Huang said, "Those words he wrote are all written in my heart. The biggest concern of my elder Chen has never been the grassland and the western regions. It's just above this court. They are in front of the court. They are officials, but they only care about their own interests. If things go on like this, the country will fall into their hands first if it is not dragged down by external things." Concubine Shu held his hand and said, "Your Majesty, please don't be angry. I have just made soup. Your Majesty, try it while it's hot." Emperor Chen drank the soup, and Concubine Shu suddenly thought of something and said, "Your Majesty, the birthday of the old lady of the Fang Mansion is coming soon, and I want to go home to see you." "It should be." Emperor Chen nodded and said, "I'll ask the inner court to prepare a generous gift for you." Shu Fei smiled and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." Emperor Chen looked at her and said mysteriously, "In addition, I also have a big gift for you." Shu Fei looked at him and asked in confusion, "What big gift?" Emperor Chen smiled and said, "You will know when the time comes. The capital has not been peaceful in recent days. The Ezhu incident has caused a lot of uproar, and even Prime Minister Feng was involved. Even ordinary people know that something big will happen in the near future. But no one expected that this big event would be so big. More than a dozen officials in Jiangnan were demoted and dismissed from their posts and will never be employed again. Prime Minister Feng resigned in name, but almost everyone knew that he was also dismissed by His Majesty because of the Jiangnan incident. The Ezhu incident was actually just an insignificant little thing in the court, but it was this little thing that involved so many earth-shaking events. Feng Xiang's faction was almost uprooted, and the Jiangnan faction suffered heavy losses. Zhou Shangshu of the Ministry of Personnel temporarily took over the position of Right Prime Minister. In this way, the position of the Minister of Personnel will be vacant again. I wonder who will end up with it. Even the structure of the court has changed because of this small incident of the usurpation of the Ministry of Personnel's Deputy Assistant Minister. Of course, the fact that Ezhu in Jiangnan can recover 5 million taels of silver also shocked the people of the capital. One state in Jiangnan is equivalent to the national treasury for half a year. The two roads in Jiangnan are rich, and a few officials can collect 1 million taels of silver. However, the national treasury has to consider even hundreds of thousands of silver taels for disaster relief. Jiangnan is so rich, and the officials in Jiangnan headed by Feng Xiang want the court to reduce taxes in Jiangnan. Not to mention that His Majesty can't stand it, even the people in Beijing can't stand it if they know it. Ministry of the Secretariat. Feng Xiang stood in front of the Shangshu Yamen. His originally gray hair had turned gray, and his body was completely hunched. Wang Xiang walked to his side and sighed, "Why is it so?" Feng Xiang said hoarsely, I have worked hard for the country all my life, and I also want to ask your majesty, why is it so? Feng Xiang, let me answer this question for your majesty. Wang Xiang looked at him and said, the Wanyan tribe on the grassland is arrogant, the small Wan countries in the western regions are ready to move, and the Xifen on the plateau are also moving towards unification. At this time, Jiangnan must not be in chaos. Wang Xiang sighed lightly and said, Feng Xiang is a loyal minister. As a loyal minister, you must not have selfish thoughts. In the past, your majesty could allow your selfish thoughts, but now, the situation has changed. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 573. Chapter 570 of the main volume of Ruyi Little Man, Fight. The uproarious Ezhu incident ended with an unexpected result. The Jiangnan faction of officials suffered the greatest setback in history. Even Prime Minister Feng had no choice but to resign and return to his hometown. None of the officials who tried to use the Ezhu incident to attack Tang Ning, the acting minister of the Ministry of Civil Affairs, ended up well. In the past few years, King Kong and King Duan had been fighting inextricably and bloodily. These neutral forces mostly watched the excitement. Jiangnan officials represented by Feng Xiang never participated in party disputes, but in this incident, it suffered a more serious blow than the party's unity and opposition to dissent. Prince Kang's mansion. There was such a big turmoil in the court, so naturally King Kong had already received the news. Prince Kong poured a glass of wine, shook his head and said, this Tang Ning is really blessed with great fortune. She won't die even if she does this. Ever since the two had completely broken up with each other and knew that he could no longer win over him, King Kong had no good impression of him and expressed regret that Tang Ning was not defeated in this chaos. He took a sip of wine, suddenly looked to the other side, and asked, Mr. Su, this time my father asked Feng Xiang to pack up and go home, and the former Minister of Civil Affairs, Zhou Shangshu, took over. Do you think we should send food to the Zhou mansion? It's a meaningful gift, but don't let Prince Duan and the Tang family get there first. Your Highness does not need to do anything more, Mr. Su said. Zhou Shangshu is already old and frail. His Majesty asked him to take over the position of Right Prime Minister. It is just a reward and a gift. In less than a year, Prime Minister Zhou will retire from this position. Sir, what you said makes sense. King Kong thought for a while, nodded slightly, and said with some regret, it's a pity that this time, Prime Minister Feng took the lead in attacking Tang Ning, and the Tang family didn't follow. If they also participated in the impeachment, maybe my father would be the same. When he was angry, he removed his Minister of Rights. How much trouble would we save? Mr. Su said, since the Tang family suffered losses in the past few times, their actions in recent days have tended to be conservative. They will not take action without full certainty. This time Feng Xianghui takes action, I am afraid they are also adding fuel to the fire. He wants to kill someone with a borrowed knife and reap the benefits. Those named Tang have always been so shady in their affairs. King Kong gritted his teeth and said somewhat happily, at the beginning, I almost wanted to get involved. Fortunately, Mr. Su, you persuaded me to stop me. Otherwise, our losses will be huge this time. Mr. Su looked at him and said, we have already lost a lot in the fight with Prince Duan. His Highness should cherish his wings and not cause unnecessary trouble. Then Tang Ning has no direct conflict with us. Your Highness should save all the attention is on King Duan. Prince Kong nodded in an educated manner and said, I understand. Sir, what do you think I should do next? Mr. Su said, although the Jiangnan party suffered heavy losses this time, they were all caused by Prime Minister Feng. After Prime Minister Feng fell, the Tang family became the only big tree that Jiangnan officials could rely on. His Majesty is now dissatisfied with Jiangnan. His Highness, we should use this east wine to drag the Tang family into the water, so that we can not only defeat Prince Duan, but also please His Majesty. Isn't that killing two birds with one stone? King Kong thought for a while, his face showed joy, and he said, "Hi, really hi. Tang family." Tang Chi's face was gloomy, and he gritted his teeth and said, "If you don't succeed enough, you will fail more than you can." This time, the incident caused by Prime Minister Feng and his party not only failed to bring down Tang Ning, but also got them involved. Not only did their whole army be wiped out, but it also caused trouble to the entire south of the Yangtze River. Your Majesty is not someone who just accepts good things. The harvest of tens of millions of taels of silver was enough for him to pay a huge price to rectify Jiangnan. He must have made plans to Jiangnan. Jiangnan West Road is a party member of Prime Minister Feng, and Jiangnan East Road is mostly the territory of the Tang family. The Tang family originally wanted to use Prime Minister Feng's sword to kill people, but now they are not killed. Instead, they are accidentally injured by Prime Minister Feng and his family, causing harm to the entire Jiangnan. Be careful with King Kong. Tang Hui also frowned and said, "The timing is not good for us. If King Kong takes advantage of the situation will be even worse." Tang Chi thought for a while and said, "With Prince Kang's mind, he would never have thought of this. What's more, with someone named Su there, he should be able to control the situation." As soon as he finished speaking, a servant of the Tang family walked in, handed the thing in his hand to Tang Hui respectfully, and said, "Master, this is Mr. Su's secret letter." After Tang Hui opened the letter, he glanced at it a few times, crumpled it into a ball, and said in a low voice, "Kong Kong has listened to the counselor and plans to stick to this matter. Su asked us to make preparations in advance." When Tang Chi heard this, his expression changed first, and then he said fiercely, "In that case, don't blame us." Prime Minister Feng fell, and Prime Minister Feng's family was also disbanded. Officials in the court thought that the matter would end there, but they did not expect that on the second day after Prime Minister Feng resigned, King Kong pointed out the evils of Jiangnan in the court. He requested the imperial court to strictly investigate the taxation of the states in the south of the Yangtze River. This proposal won the hearts of the Holy Spirit. His Majesty rarely praised King Kong in public and gave him many rewards. However, fortunes and misfortunes are unpredictable. Within a day of King Kang's success, the imperial censor accused him of indulgence every day. There were many displays in the palace that exceeded the regulations. The hierarchy of the royal family was strict. The emperor had the emperor's regulations, and the prince had the prince's regulations. Exceeding the rules is a serious crime, and it is not without precedent that exceeding the rules is defined as the intention to rebel, beheading, and confiscating the family. Fortunately, King Kang's situation of exceeding the rules was not too serious. Even so, he was fined and was not allowed to go to the court to discuss politics or participate in court affairs for 1 month. Anyone with a discerning eye knows that this is another secret confrontation between King Kong and King Duan, but this time, there is no winner, and both sides suffer. The court was full of fights. Both Kong Wang and Duan Wang were hurt in the fight, and then they stopped fighting. Everyone shifted their attention away from them and put it elsewhere. The birthday banquet of the old lady of the Fang family was approaching. The Fang family brought the old lady from Lingzhou to the capital. His Majesty allowed concubine Fang Shu to visit her outside the palace. Most officials in the court also had to think about what birthday gifts to send at that time, neither appearing ostentatious nor being stingy. The Fang family has always been low-key. When talking about the Fang family, many people in the capital may not realize it at the first time, but after thinking about it carefully, they are secretly shocked. The old lady of the Fang family now has 2 sons and 1 daughter, who hold important positions in the Ministry of Households and the Ministry of Personnel respectively. There is also concubine Fang Shu, a favorite concubine in the palace. If you really count, even the power of the Tang family is not as good as that of the Fang family. Of course, the Tang family also has Prince Duan behind them. Prince Duan is the prince who is competing for the throne, and the Tang family has many followers. Prince Run, born to concubine Fang Shu, is still a child. No matter how good the Fang family's resources are, they can only be left vacant. After all, will a child who has not grown up think about becoming an emperor? Even so, no one dares to underestimate the Fang family in the capital. Not to mention the Tang family, even the two princes are unwilling to have any conflicts with the Fang family. Today is the day when concubine Fang Shu returns to the mansion. Concubines in the palace cannot stay overnight outside the palace. She must return to the palace before the palace gate is closed. After coming out of the old lady's room, concubine Fang Shu's smile on her face was restrained. She looked at Fang Hong and Fang Zhe outside the door and said, "Brother, fourth brother, I have an important matter to discuss with you." Seeing her solemn expression, Fang Hong became nervous and said, "Go to my study." In the study of Fang Mansion, Fang Hong personally closed the door, and only the three brothers and sisters were left in the room. Fang Hong then looked at concubine Fang Shu and asked, "What's the matter, my second sister?" Concubine Fang Shu looked at the two and said, "2 days ago, Yuan told me that he wanted to be the emperor." Fang Hong's face changed and asked, "Did he get bewitched by someone?" "He just didn't mean it." Concubine Fang Shu shook her head and said, "But his words reminded me that although Yuan is still young, he is a prince after all. With the temperament of Prince Duan and Prince Kong, once they ascend the throne, will Yuan still have a way to survive?" Fang Hong's face was complicated. He naturally knew the answer to this question. If Prince Kong and Prince Duan ascended the throne, other princes might still be idle princes and stay in their fiefdoms honestly, but the princes born to the favorite concubines in the palace would definitely have no way to survive. Only one of Prince Duan and Prince Kong could sit on that position alive, and no matter who sat on that position, they would not let go of Prince Run, who was born to concubine Shu. Not only that, even the Fang family would decline or even perish by then. After all, the new emperor will not watch the power of the Ministry of Personnel and the Ministry of Revenue fall into the hands of one family at the same time. Fang Zhe's face remained calm. After concubine Fang Shu finished speaking, he looked at her and asked, "Second sister, do you mean to let Yuan also participate in the fight for the throne? Yuan is also a prince, he will grow up sooner or later." Concubine Fang Shu's face was calm, and she asked back, "Since they can fight, why can't we fight?" You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 574. Chapter 571 of the main volume of Ruyi Little Man. No, I think so. Even Fang Hong himself had thought about this problem. When Fang Shifei said these words, he did not look very shocked. After thinking about it, he said, "Yuan is too young. Neither your majesty nor the courtiers will do it agree with him to take part in the heir apparent. Being young is an advantage, not a disadvantage." Fang Zhe said, "Now that your majesty is in good health, Yuan has enough time to grow up. He will eventually grow up, and your majesty will always grow old." Fang Hong has been in official circles for many years, so he can naturally see this. Your majesty, who is in his prime, actually has an antagonistic relationship with King Kong and King Duan. King Kong and King Duan want to ascend to the throne as soon as possible, so why doesn't your majesty not want to occupy this position forever? There is only one emperor. Your majesty is an obstacle to the ascension of the two kings Kong Duan. The two kings are also a threat to your majesty. The young King Run cannot pose such a threat to his majesty. To some extent, he has an advantage over King Kong Duan. As for the power behind it, the Fang family has no rivals in Beijing. Concubine Fang Shu looked at Fang Hong and said, "For Yuan and the Fang family, eldest brother must prepare for these things in advance." Fang Hong nodded and said, I understand. After speaking, he looked at concubine Fang Shu again and said in surprise, why does Yuan suddenly want to be the emperor? This is not important. Fang Shifei looked at him and asked, the result is more important than the process, isn't it? After concubine Fang Shu left the Fang family, Fang Hong poured a cup of tea, moistened his throat, and sighed, in order to fight for the throne, Prince Duan and Prince Kong have come and gone, and will not allow others to interfere. Trying to fight with them is tantamount to a tiger's mouth. Seize food. Fang Jie stood beside him and said calmly, I'm afraid we are going to fight with more than just King Duan and King Kong. Fang Hong looked at him and asked, what does this mean? I can't see through King Huai. Fang Jie crossed his arms, shook his head, and said, how can a person with no scheming and no identity background become the only one who has stayed in the country besides King Duan and King Kong? He is not the only adult prince of the capital and His Majesty's adult prince. Even Yuan staying in the capital is in danger, how could he not realize it? Fang Jie said to himself, then smiled and said, it's a bit interesting. Whether King Huai is pretending to be stupid or really stupid, there is only one way for Yuan to go, and there is only one way for the Fang family to go. Fang Hong breathed a sigh of relief and said, if you want to seize the direct descendants, one person will be the Minister of the Ministry of Official Affairs, and the other will be the Minister of the Household Department. Minister, that's not enough. As soon as he finished speaking, a sharp and thin voice suddenly came from outside. The imperial edict has arrived. Fang Hong, the left servant of the Ministry of Civil Affairs, will receive it. Fang Hong was startled, and the next moment he walked out quickly. He saw two eunuchs standing in the courtyard, one of them holding an imperial edict in his hand and looking at him with a smile. There was a trace of suspicion in Fang Hong's eyes, but he still took 2 steps forward, adjusted his clothes, knelt on his knees, and said loudly, I accept the order. Zhou Shangshu of the Ministry of Personnel took over the position of Prime Minister Feng, and the position of Minister of the Ministry of Personnel became vacant. In addition to the Prime Minister, the Ministry of Personnel and the Minister of Hubei are considered to be the 2 most powerful positions in the court. Countless pairs of eyes are fixed on the Ministry of Personnel, including King Kong and King Duan, the 2 princes who have taken the throne. There are 2 ministers in the Ministry of Personnel. Sun Qian, the right assistant minister, has just taken office. It is impossible for him to be promoted to minister in such a short time. Although Fang Hong has been in the Ministry of Personnel for a long time, his qualifications are still a little behind. Several other officials in the court were barely qualified for this position. However, not long after everyone's eyes were fixed on this seat, the results came out from the palace. After Zhou Shangshu left, Fang Hong, the former Minister of Personnel, took his place and became the new Minister of Personnel. Zhou Shangshu could not sit in the position of right minister for long, but Fang Hong was different. As long as he became Shangshu of the Ministry of Personnel, it would be difficult for him to step down again. From the minister to the minister, it seems that it is only 1 step from the second in command to the first in command, but the power of the minister and the minister are completely different. This means that the Ministry of Secretaries and Officials is completely in the hands of the Fang family. Of course, others would not envy Fang Hong's good fortune. Concubine Fang Shu was the beloved of the Holy One, and the Fang family was full of talented people, so the Holy Family was naturally strong. There are also people who feel sorry for the Fang family. The Fang family has such power, but King Run is too young. If King Run is a few years older, he can participate in the fight for the heir. When the time comes, the Fang family only needs to raise their arms and there will be countless supporters. Successors come one after another, and what happened to King Kong and King Duan? With such an important position as Minister of the Ministry of Civil Affairs, others were given an advantage. King Kong and King Duan did not do anything. To them, it was not important whether this position belonged to their own people, but it was not important to the other party's talents. It was better to take advantage of King Run than to take advantage of others. Good luck to the other party. After all, King Run will not compete with them for the throne. Royal Palace, Shuxia Palace. Concubine Fang Shu looked at Emperor Chen and said, "Your Majesty, this is absolutely impossible. Although my eldest brother has been in the Ministry of Civil Affairs for many years, he is still far from the position of minister. In this way, I wonder what other ministers in the court will think." "They can think whatever they want." Emperor Chen looked at her and said, "I always only look at ability, not qualifications. Looking at the court, there is no one more suitable for the position of Minister of Civil Affairs than him. If they hadn't decided so early, wouldn't the two of them have fought to the death again and turned the court into a mess? This Minister of the Ministry of Personnel should be regarded as a gift from me." At this point, Concubine Fang Shu couldn't say anything more, so she could only bow and said, "I thank you, Your Majesty." Just as Chen Huang was about to speak, a young eunuch walked in from outside the door and whispered, "Your Majesty, we are here." Emperor Chen looked at Concubine Fang Shu and said, "You wait here for a while, I'll be back as soon as I can." He left Shuxia Palace and came to the imperial study room. There was already a person waiting in the palace. When the captain of the Sharp Blade team saw Emperor Chen coming in, he immediately saluted and said, "See Your Majesty." No courtesy. Emperor Chen waved his hand and said, "I have something I want you to do." The squad leader cupped his fists and said, "Please give me Your Majesty's orders." Huang Chen took out a letter and handed it to him, saying, "Go to Jiangnan again and deliver this letter to Tang Ning personally." The squad leader said, "Follow your orders." Emperor Chen nodded and added, "When he sends people back, he should be quieter and don't make any noise." After the team leader left, Chen Huang turned around and found Wei Jian standing behind him, looking at him. Emperor Chen looked at him and asked, "Do you think I love money very much, and as an emperor, I am a bit too stingy?" Wei Jian nodded and said, "Your Majesty loves talents, otherwise he would not have entrusted the young Lord Tang with important tasks, let alone let Lord Fang sit in the position of Minister of the Ministry of Civil Affairs." Chen Huang corrected him, "I'm talking about money and wealth." Wei Jian thought for a while and said, "Your Majesty takes this money from the world and uses it for the world. How can you say you love money?" Emperor Chen looked at him for a long time and then said, "If Prime Minister Feng could be like you, he would be a Taifu now." In Shuxia Palace, Concubine Shu did not wait for Emperor Chen to come, but she waited for Prince Run first. Concubine Shu dismissed the people around her and ordered Du Wan to guard the door. Then she looked at him and asked, "Does Yuan still remember what he said to his mother and concubine 2 days ago?" Zhao Yuan asked doubtfully, "What are you talking about?" Concubine Shu looked at him and asked, "Does Yuan still want to be the emperor? Since you can marry the Wang family's sister, the Bai family's sister, and the Zhang family's sister without being an emperor, then what's the point of being an emperor?" Zhao Yuan shook his head and said, "No." Concubine Shu covered his mouth and said, "No, you want to." Concubine Fang Shu looked into Zhao Yuan's eyes and said seriously, "Yuan, you are 12 years old. You should know some things." Zhao Yuan said with a bitter face, "But mother-in-law, I really don't want to be an emperor. When I am an emperor, I have to be like my father. My father gets up at midnight. I can't get up in the morning. If you are not the emperor, you cannot marry the Wang family's sister, the Bai family's sister, the Zhang family's sister. Do you really not want to be the emperor?" Zhao Yuan looked at her and said firmly, "No, I think so." Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 575. Chapter 572 of the main text of Ruyi Little Man, encountering the old Incas. This trip to the south of the Yangtze River took a little longer than Tang Ning expected. He thought he would be able to finish the exams in Jiangnan West Road in at most 1 month, but he has stayed in Jiangnan West Road for more than a month and a half, and there are still 2 states he has not visited. The main reason was that it started raining half a month ago. The rain was not too big or too small, but it lasted for half a month, which delayed most of their trip. The secondary reason was that about 10 days ago, he received a secret letter from Emperor Chen. The letter had no signature or seal, and was filled with Chen Huang's condolences for their trip to the south of the Yangtze River. Tang Ning ignored the clichés and stage words, only to realize that there were only 2 words left in the entire letter. Silver. Although the other states on Jiangnan West Road are not as wealthy as Ezhu, they have traveled to more than a dozen states, plus those in Ezhu, and the total amount of tax money recovered is nearly 10 million taels. This was Tang Ning's decision to restrain himself in order to keep the overall situation in mind and avoid causing chaos in Jiangnan. If he really ignored it and investigated impartially, these Jiangnan officials might rise up to save their lives. After seeing the wealth in Jiangnan, Chen Huang only had money left in his eyes. The letter said that any businessman in Jiangnan who evaded taxes would be fined 10 times. Based on the severity of the punishment, Tang Ning felt that he wanted to take away Chen Guo's 10 years of tax revenue. Take it back once and for all. However, he could also understand Chen Huang's desire for money. After he left Beijing this time, he happened to miss 2 important news, and these 2 events were related to the survival of the Chen kingdom and captured the hearts of the courtiers in the palace. The Jiagu and Chuhu tribes have suppressed the Wanyan tribe for so long, and finally they can no longer suppress it. The situation in the grassland has reversed, and the western region has gradually grown into a threat to the Chen state. Once there are changes in these 2 places, the Chen state has been stable for decades. The situation will be completely changed. Only when the national treasury has sufficient money and food can we have the confidence to fight. The current domestic situation in Chen state is very stable. As long as we can ensure food and salary, we can kill them with money. There is no need to worry about being passively beaten. In addition, he also heard about the resignation of Prime Minister Feng, which implicated more than a dozen officials in Jiangnan. Tang Ning originally thought that the Tang family would seize this matter and pursue it fiercely, so she made those arrangements. Unexpectedly, it was Prime Minister Feng who jumped out. Since he entered the officialdom, he only wandered around the Hanlin Academy and the 6th Ministry, and then went to Zioqi Wei. He only met the 2 prime ministers in the court a few times, did not speak to them, and was not very familiar with them. The impression of Prime Minister Feng only exists through hearing. It is said that he was an upright man. He had reprimanded His Majesty in front of hundreds of officials more than once, showing no mercy to the emperor. He was called the contemporary Wei Zheng. In order to learn from Tang Dazong, Emperor Chen had always been very generous to Prime Minister Feng's actions, except this time. Obviously, Jiangnan has become a sensitive word in Chen Huang's heart. Whoever touches it will die, and the Prime Minister is no exception. Without Prime Minister Feng, wouldn't Prime Minister Zhou immediately take the lead? Speaking of Prime Minister Zhou, we have to mention Feng Hong. Zhou Shangshu of the Ministry of Personnel replaced Prime Minister Feng, and Feng Hong took over his position and became the new Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. He was busy raising money for Chen Huang in Jiangnan. He originally wanted to trick the Tang family, but in the end, he actually took advantage of Fang Xiaoyu's uncle. The Fang family now has a Minister of Household Affairs and a Minister of Official Affairs. If it weren't for Zhao Yuan was too young and only wanted to pick up girls and not be emperor, so the Fang family could not be involved in party disputes. With Chen Huang's suspicious temperament, it was probably impossible to give these 2 real power departments to the Fang family to monopolize. Chen Zhou walked in from outside, bowed his hands and said, "Sir, the rain has stopped. Looking at the weather, it should be sunny in the next few days." Tang Ning, who has been under the mildew rain for the past half-month, is almost moldy. I wonder if Bai Juyi, who wrote Jiangnan is good, the scenery is familiar to me before, has ever experienced the embarrassment of washing underwear and not drying it? He didn't want to stay in this dark and damp room for a moment, so he stood up and said, "Notify them and let them set off immediately. Just send 2 Jianggu from the remaining 2 states on Jiangnan West Road." Chen Zhou responded and went out to make arrangements. Tang Ning walked out of the room and took a deep breath of fresh air. The only good thing about the rainy season that lasts for half a month is that it cleans the air. Take a deep breath, and you will be filled with a refreshing smell. From here, it only takes 1 day to enter Gangnam East Road. Chen Huang may have forgotten that the purpose of their trip to Jiangnan was to eradicate the rebel forces and not to raise money everywhere, but Tang Ning herself did not forget it. However, he traveled throughout Jiangnan West Road and found nothing wrong except that all things withered used by the Ezhu governor should not appear on his hands. He asked the governor of Ezhu, but the other party only admitted that he bought his things from an unknown businessman, and he didn't know anything else. Tang Ning was not sure whether officials from other prefectures had contact with the king of Gezhou mentioned by Gong Sun Ying. He could not just ask local officials if they wanted to rebel when he saw them. However, judging from the current situation, the root cause of the Jiangnan rebellion was it is very likely that it is on Jiangnan East Road. Jiangnan East Road is further away from the capital, and it is also richer. There are many wealthy merchants who are as rich as the country. Those families are so complicated and powerful that even the local government has to give way to them, or simply hold a big tree. Trees, their influence in the local area is so deep-rooted that even the imperial court has to avoid them. The foundation of the Tang family is here. If Tang Ning wants to fulfill the goals set by Chen Huang, he must find a way from here. Rezhu. As the last stop on the Jiangnan West Road, after leaving Rezhu, it takes 3 days to travel to Kuzhu. On the day Tang Ning and the officials from the Ministry of Civil Affairs left, officials of all sizes in Rezhu saw each other off at a distance of 10 miles. Their reluctance to leave was beyond words. "Master Tang, walk slowly. My lords, have a safe trip. When your excellency returns, you must come to Rezhu again and let me wait for all the landlords." Before an official could finish speaking, someone covered his mouth and kicked him in the back. If this person really came to Rezhu on his return trip, wouldn't they be worried again? Although this Tang dynasty official in the official department was not as scary as the legend said, his days in Rezhu also caused a stir in the state. Especially many merchants in Rezhu were caught by him and paid a lot of fines to the court. Public security, population, official discipline, he doesn't seem to care much about these. He only cares about taxes and money. To describe him as loving money as much as his life is not an exaggeration. The governor of Rezhu stood on the official road, watched the group of carriages and horses go away, and said slowly, with his money-loving character, he will definitely target those people. There are many ruthless characters in Jiangnan East Road. Starting from Rezhu, the nearest is Kuzhu. Kuzhu has 5 counties under its jurisdiction, and the state capital is built in Dingyang County. Before the group arrived at the state capital, the inn had already passed the news. When they arrived outside the city, the governor of Kuzhu and local officials came out of the city to greet them in person. The governor of Kuzhu was a middle-aged man with a kind face. When Tang Ning got off the carriage, he stepped forward and said with a smile, "My lords, I'm here to welcome you, but I feel sorry for you." Tang Ning greeted him with a smile and was about to follow him into the city. She glanced at him inadvertently, stopped in her tracks, and her eyes rested on a local official standing in the back row. A trace of surprise appeared on his face, and the governor of Kuzhu looked at him and asked doubtfully, "Master Tang, what's wrong?" Tang Ning came to her senses, looked away, shook her head and said, "It's okay." The officials of the Ministry of Personnel were still arranged at the inn. After the Kuzhu governor made an appointment with them for a dust-cleansing banquet tonight, he left with the Kuzhu officials. Tang Ning walked out of the room and saw someone still standing in the courtyard. He walked forward and asked with a smile, "Brother Su, why are you here?" A few years ago, he met Su Qingyang when he was still in Lingzhou. At that time, he participated in the provincial examination as the second best in the state examination. In the later palace examination, although his performance was not very good, he was still good. Yes, even if he didn't enter the Hanlin Academy, he still stayed in Beijing. He has a bright future and shouldn't appear here. Su Qingyang smiled awkwardly and said, "It's a long story." In Tang Ning's impression, Su Qingyang always appeared with Zhang Yanzheng. He seemed to have never seen the two of them alone. He was not used to seeing Su Qingyang alone. He smiled and joked, "Brother Zhang didn't show up with me this time, are you together?" "Brother Tang, it's really you." As soon as he finished speaking, a surprised voice suddenly came from behind him. Tang Ning turned around and saw Zhang Yanzheng standing at the door of the inn, looking at him with surprise. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 576. Ruyi Xiaolang Jun Text Volume 573 Kuzhu Chaos. In the post room, Tang Ning looked at Su Qingyang and asked, "If I remember correctly, Brother Su should have been in the sense orate before, right?" Su Qingyang smiled and said, "About a year ago, I offended the powerful in the capital, and then I was transferred here to be a county magistrate." At this time a year ago, Tang Ning was still in Chu as a marriage envoy, fighting wits and courage with the second prince of the grassland and the crown prince of Chu, and he didn't know much about what happened in the capital. Although he had learned about the major events that happened in the capital during that period after he came back, Su Mei would definitely not care about the transfer of a minor official from the Sensorate to Jiangnan, so Tang Ning didn't see this in the intelligence she collected. Anyone who can stay in the capital after the imperial examination is better than the officials who are sent out. Su Qingyang can stay in the Sensorate to work, and his future is naturally better than being a small county magistrate in Jiangnan. The promotion process of the two is completely different. He looked at Zhang Yanzheng again and asked, "Brother Su, did you offend the powerful?" "Brother Zhang, why? You were doing well in the Ministry of Works, why are you here?" Zhang Yanzheng said indignantly, "Brother Su is an imperial censor, and he has the responsibility to supervise the powerful officials in the capital. Just because he spoke out for justice and redressed the grievances of the people, he was transferred without any distinction. What's the point of such a court? I was so angry that I asked to be transferred to Dingyang." Tang Ning looked at him. Su Qingyang might have been transferred here because he offended the powerful, but he was not sure whether Zhang Yanzheng was angry at the time. After all, once or twice is a coincidence, it can't be a coincidence every time. He forced himself to think healthily and simply, looked at Su Qingyang, and changed the subject. "Which dignitary did you offend?" Before Su Qingyang opened his mouth, Zhang Yanzheng immediately said, "It was Princess Yi Yang." Princess Yi Yang indulged her subordinates and oppressed the people. Brother Su reported this matter to the court. His Majesty severely punished Princess Yi Yang's servants and reprimanded her. Princess Yi Yang held a grudge and secretly made efforts, so Brother Su was transferred here. Princess Yi Yang was a shrew. Everyone in the capital was afraid of her. If she really wanted to make things difficult for a small official, the Ministry of Personnel would not give her this face. Tang Ning looked at him and said with a smile, "Brother Su, don't worry. I will help you get rid of your anger when I return to Beijing." "Absolutely not." Su Qingyang looked at him and said, "Although Princess Yi Yang has a bad record, she is still a princess of the royal family. If Brother Tang angers her, the consequences will be disastrous." Tang Ning smiled and said, "Brother Su, don't worry. I have dealt with Princess Yi Yang quite a lot." Before leaving, he took the time to bleed Princess Yi Yang. Now she turned pale when she saw him. She was either pretending to be sick or pretending to have her period. Tang Ning was ordered to bleed, and she was the only one who had to hide from him. How could she dare to retaliate? When Su Qingyang saw him talking about Princess Yi Yang, his face was indifferent. He seemed to realize something in his heart and stopped talking, but the expression on his face became more complicated. The three of them were once the top three in the Lingzhou provincial examination. Before the provincial examination, Lingzhou, whether students or people, generally believed that the champion of that time was either him or Zhang Yanzheng. But who would have thought that during the state examination, this brother Tang appeared out of nowhere and left them far behind with a gap that made people despair. Later, when they arrived in the capital, he and Zhang Yanzheng realized how high the sky was and how thick the earth was. There were so many talented people in Jiangnan and the capital, and there was still a big gap between them. But when facing Tangning, the experience of the talented people in Jiangnan and the capital was exactly the same as theirs. He was the first in the provincial examination, the first in the palace examination, the first 3-point champion in more than 10 years, and was newly admitted to the Hanlin Academy. He was also specially appointed to walk in the 6 ministries. Step by step, he has come to this day. He is the left Xiao Yi Zonglang Jiang and the acting assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, while the two of them can only live in a small county in Jiangnan, one as the county magistrate and the other as the county lieutenant, and barely get by under the suppression of the county magistrate. Zhang Yanshen's expression was exactly the same as his. They were friends in the past, but after only 2 or 3 years, the gap has become so big, which really makes people feel uncomfortable. Tang Ning looked at them and said with a smile, "Brother Su, Brother Zhang, don't worry. I will transfer you back when I return to the capital this time." Zhang Yanzheng looked at him and said in surprise, "Is this possible? For those who grew up in the north, if they can stay in the capital, who would be willing to come to Jiangnan?" The poem only says that Jiangnan is good, but it does not say that the cockroaches in Jiangnan are bigger than those in the north. Clothes can't be dried even after hanging for half a month. The family needs more than 10 sets of clothes. His salary last year was all donated to the cloth shop and tailor. Tang Ning nodded and said with a smile, "Okay." The examination and transfer of officials in Jiangnan were previously under the jurisdiction of Fang Hong, the left assistant minister. As the acting assistant minister, Tang Ning, in addition to the word acting in his name, has even greater powers than Fang Hong before. Transferring 2 officials back to Beijing is just a matter of a transfer order. Zhang Yanzheng seemed to have thought of something, his face fell again, and he said, "No, if Brother Su returns to Beijing, he will fall into the hands of Princess Yi Yang. It is safer to stay here. If Brother Su doesn't go back, I won't go back either." Su Qingyang said, "You go back, you can't get used to the climate in Jiangnan, or the capital is more suitable for you." Zhang Yanzheng waved his hand and said, "If you don't leave, I won't leave either." Tang Ning stroked the goosebumps on her arms and said, "Don't worry, I won't break up your 2 miserable brothers. I left Princess Yi Yang's fate for you brothers. When you return to the capital, you just want her to visit in person, you can apologize." With Chen Wang's attitude towards Jiangnan, it will definitely not be easy for local officials in Jiangnan to be promoted in the future. If the 2 of them stay in Jiangnan, they will probably waste their lives. Su Qingyang thought for a while, smiled, cupped his hands and said, "Thank you so much, Brother Tang." Zhang Yanzheng also clasped his fists and said, "Thank you so much, Brother Tang." Meeting old friends in a foreign country is naturally a joyful thing, especially when they meet 2 people at once. Tang Ning asked Chen Zhou to prepare wine and food and have a few drinks with them before the dust-free banquet in the evening. After a few glasses of wine, Zhang Yanzheng was already a little drunk. When he talked about the incident in Lingzhou, he hooked Su Qinjiang's neck, patted the table and said, "I knew at that time that Brother Tang is different from us. Qingyang, you tell me if." Tang Ning looked at them, nodded slightly and said, "It's different." At the dust-washing banquet in Kuzhu, the atmosphere was different from that in Ezhu. In fact, since as who, other officials of Jiangnan West Road, even the governor of a state, have been gentle and soft-spoken when talking to Xiao Zhang, the official department. As for the hangmen banquet, they have never encountered him even once. Don't reach out to hit the smiling person. In this situation, Tang Ning would not go too far. As long as it was not related to money, he would turn a blind eye to some innocuous minor flaws. Kuzhu is not a big place, so if nothing happens, the exam can be over in 2 days. During the banquet, Tang Ning and the governor of Ezhu made an agreement to start the assessment of the counties in Ezhu tomorrow. The governor of Ezhu made some arrangements for this. During the banquet, the guests and the host had a great time and dispersed after the banquet. When Tang Ning returned to the inn and was about to wash up and rest, Chen Zhou knocked on the door, walked in, and said, "Sir, the governor of Kuzhu wants to see you." While at the banquet, Tang Ning noticed that the governor of Kuzhu seemed to have something to say. She was not surprised at this moment, so she put on her coat and said, "Invite him in." After a while, he looked at the Kuzhu governor who came in from outside and asked, "President Sun came here late at night, but what is the important matter?" The governor of Kuzhu took something out of his sleeve and put it on the table. Tang Ning took a look and saw an envelope on the table. The seal on the envelope was familiar to him. There was a similar pattern on the secret letter that Emperor Chen gave him. The governor of Kuzhu bowed his hand to him and said, "The news about the rebels in the south of the Yangtze River was reported to your majesty by me. Your majesty sent a secret letter a month ago, ordering me to cooperate with Mr. Tang to thoroughly investigate the matter. Today I finally wait until Mr. Tang. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 577. Remember in 1 second, read the wonderful novel for free without pop-up window. Tang Ning had a good impression of the governor of Kuzhu, but he did not expect that he was actually a comrade in the organization. Along the way, he fought wits and courage with local officials in Jiangnan, from the governor to the county magistrate, who all treated him as a plague god and avoided him as much as possible. He encountered layers of obstacles even in normal examinations, not to mention the forces that wanted to investigate the rebellion. Having a trustworthy teammate can save a lot of trouble and avoid many detours. Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "What did Governor Sun find out?" "This is a serious matter. I am afraid of being exposed, so I have not acted rashly." Governor Sun looked at him and said, "However, in the past 2 months, I have found some clues through my investigations. Those rebels are very likely related to the Zhu family in Kuzhu." Zhu family. Sir Tang is not from Jiangnan, so he doesn't know much about the situation in Jiangnan and Kuzhu. Governor Sun explained, although the east road of Jiangnan is under the jurisdiction of the court, the local family forces in various states are intertwined and extremely large. Local governments either dare not compete with them or have been recruited by them. The Zhu family in Kuzhu is one of the 3 major families that actually control Kuzhu. Tang Ning didn't know about the situation in Jiangnan before, but he had done enough homework before going to Jiangnan this time. The east road of Jiangnan is the richest place in the state of Chen, but the court has limited control over it. The Jiangnan nobles have been inherited in the local area for hundreds of years, and their control over the local people is even greater than that of the government. With the influence that their family has accumulated over hundreds of years, they can easily incite the people and stir up civil unrest. The local government is most afraid of civil unrest. Once such incidents occur in a place, the career of local officials will almost end here. There was no civil unrest in Kuzhu, but someone spread the words that incited the people to rebel, and the place where the incident happened was within the sphere of influence of the Zhu family in Kuzhu. Since there was a problem in Kuzhu, Tang Ning naturally could not leave here so quickly. After the governor of Kuzhu finished speaking, Tang Ning nodded and said, I have a general understanding of the situation. Lord Sun has worked hard. The governor of Kuzhu sighed and said, as long as Kuzhu can be stable, no matter how hard I work, it is worth it. Tang Ning looked at him and asked, Lord Sun just said that the magistrate of Dingyang County is from the Zhu family. The governor of Kuzhu said, yes, the magistrate of Dingyang County was recruited by the Zhu family not long after he came to Kuzhu. These local officials in Jiangnan have almost been divided up by major families. If they go against local officials, they will not be able to move forward at all. Tang Ning nodded and said, then let's start with Dingyang County. Dingyang County is the largest of the 5 counties in Kuzhu and is also the location of the state capital. In the past, Tang Ning would only send 2 guards to take a look at this kind of county-level government office, but today he went there in person. The Dingyang County office had already prepared everything. When Tang Ning brought 2 guards from the Ministry of Personnel to the county office, Su Qingyang, Zhang Yanzheng, and a man were already waiting outside. The Dingyang County magistrate stepped forward and said, Dingyang County magistrate, respectfully welcome the officials from the Ministry of Personnel. Tang Ning glanced at Gong Sunying beside him, and Gong Sunying shook his head, indicating that the Dingyang County magistrate showed no signs of being controlled by the Gu worm. The Jiangnan turmoil was most likely caused by the Qian king of Liang. Gong Sunying and Bai Jin knew about Gu and were used to using Gu worms to control others. The Gu masters around the Qian king would only be more powerful. After the Dingyang County magistrate finished speaking, he looked back, frowned, and scolded, Su County magistrate, Zhang County lieutenant, what's wrong with you two? You haven't met the officials from the Ministry of Personnel yet. Tang Ning knew that Su Qingyang and Zhang Yanzheng, 2 outsiders, were not doing well in Dingyang, but he didn't expect that the Dingyang County magistrate could scold them like this in front of the officials from the Ministry of Personnel. Su Qingyang and Zhang Yanzheng could only bow and say, hello, gentlemen. Tang Ning looked at them and said with a smile, Brother Su, Brother Zhang, you don't have to be polite. Just call me as before. The expression on Dingyang County magistrate's face froze. He looked at Tang Ning and County Magistrate Su and County Lieutenant Zhang, and his heart skipped a beat. Could it be that they knew each other? He just wanted to show off his power in front of the officials of the Ministry of Personnel and show his importance to these officials in Beijing. If the 3 of them had known each other for a long time, his flattery would have hit the horse's leg. He looked at Tang Ning and asked tentatively, did Lord Tang know Su County Magistrate and Zhang County Lieutenant before? Of course I know them. Tang Ning nodded and said, I am a student from the same state as Su County Magistrate and Zhang County Lieutenant, and we all passed the imperial examination in the same year. The Dingyang County Magistrate thought it was not good. For officials, the friendship between the same year is usually deep. These people often support and help each other in the court. I wonder if his actions just now will cause dissatisfaction from Lord Tang of the Ministry of Personnel. After thinking about it carefully, he was a little relieved. What he did just now was not too much. This Lord Tang is a Beijing official, a senior official of the 4th rank, so he shouldn't be so narrow-minded. Speaking of which, Su County Magistrate and Zhang County Lieutenant were both Jinshi graduates 3 years ago, which means that Lord Tang has only been in the officialdom for 3 years, and he has reached the 4th rank in 3 years. This is simply unheard of. He extremely doubts the authenticity of the 3 of them being Jinshi graduates of the same year. He looked at Tang Ning, a dry smile appeared on his face, and said, I didn't expect Lord Tang, Lord Su, and Lord Zhang to be of the same year. What a coincidence, lords, don't stand outside, please come in. Dingyang County has prepared all the materials required for the official examination. Many of the standards set by the official department are clearly written in black and white, including case numbers, population growth figures, taxation, etc. The magistrate of Dingyang County is not too nervous about this assessment. The number of cases in Dingyang County last year was reduced compared to previous years, the population has increased, the tax revenue is clean, and there are no major flaws in education. There is no need to worry about the assessment results. Unless the officials deliberately make things difficult for him. But why would the officials of the Ministry of Civil Affairs give him a hard time? They had no grievances. He only reprimanded the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Civil Affairs for a few words of the same year. It was unlikely that he would deliberately target him because of this matter. Tang Ning opened the household booklet, looked at it, shook her head and said, "The household registration management is in chaos, Magistrate Wu, this can't be done." He looked at Zhang Gu behind him and said, "Give me a xiaozhong." The results of the official assessment are divided into 3 levels, upper, middle and lower. Each level is further divided into 3 levels, upper, middle and lower. Lower middle is the 8th level, which is only slightly better than the worst lower. If the assessment is below middle, it means he has failed, and he may be demoted or dismissed. In one assessment, he is lower middle. His position as Dingyang County Magistrate must be unsafe. The Dingyang County Magistrate's face turned pale and he pursed his lips. Tang Ning had already opened a new volume and continued to shake her head, "This can't be done. The security of Dingyang County is still a little bad. For Brother Zhang's sake, top, let's give it middle or bottom." Zhang Yanzheng was stunned and said, "Brother Tang, just do things impartially, don't take me into consideration." Since Brother Zhang said so. Tang Ning looked at the palm and said, "Then let's change it to Xiaozhong. The Dingyang County Magistrate stood there in a daze. This high-ranking official from the Ministry of Civil Affairs could just make random assessments. He actually had to change the conclusions he had already made. He had no principles at all. What made it even more difficult for him to understand was how he had offended him and why he was so targeted. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 578. Chapter 575 of the main text volume of Ruyi Little Man, the assessment of the Zhu family in Kuzhu was going on one by one, and the cold sweat on the forehead of Dingyang County Magistrate became more and more. He had long heard about what the acting minister of the Ministry of Civil Affairs was doing in Ezhu. Before this person came to Jiangnan East Road, the officials here were wary of him. However, although he made such a big noise in Ezhu, he restrained himself a lot in the following dozen states. Perhaps he just regarded Ezhu as a place to establish his authority. Could it be that he had the same influence in Kuzhu this time? What a coincidence that Dingyang County was regarded as his first choice to establish his authority in Jiangnan East Road. The Dingyang County Magistrate secretly complained in his heart. According to the rumors about this Tang dynasty, this person was soft-hearted and not hard-hearted. If the local officials treated each other with courtesy, most of them would be fine. But if he was ignorant like the Ezhu governor, he would end up in trouble. Not much better than them. At this moment, he didn't even dare to defend himself. He just wanted to end the exam as soon as possible so that he could go to the Zhu family to report the news. He, the county magistrate, was supported by the Zhu family. If something happened, he would have to rely on the Zhu family. After several assessments, Tang Ning looked at the Dingyang County magistrate, shook his head and said, "Wu County Magistrate, the situation in Dingyang County is not good. As a parent official, you must be careful." The Dingyang County Magistrate wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and said, "What Master Tang taught me, my subordinates must remember." After the Dingyang County Magistrate resigned, Su Qingyang looked at Tang Ning and said, "Brother Tang, the officials won't blame you, right?" Tang Ning smiled and said, "It's okay, I can still do this. There is actually nothing wrong with Dingyang County. A mid to high score in the comprehensive evaluation is not too high. Anyone with a discerning eye can tell from Tang Ning's actions just now that he is deliberately making things difficult. But he is not a drunkard who cares about drinking. The Dingyang County magistrate is not his target, those people behind him are. Not long after he stayed at the county government office, Chen Zhou walked in and whispered, "Sir," he went in the direction of Zhujiazhuang. Zhujiazhuang is the territory of the Zhu family in Kuzhu. The reason why the Zhujia family is called Zhuang instead of a mansion is because the Zhujiazhuang has been in Kuzhu for many years and the clan is extremely large. They have been standing in Kuzhu for hundreds of years, and their influence has penetrated into every aspect of Kuzhu. In the land of Kuzhu, even the government has to give them some thin noodles. There are two other families like the Zhu family in Kuzhu. At this time, a carriage hurriedly drove into Zhujiazhuang. The magistrate of Ding'an got off the carriage, ran into a high gate, and said, "Quick, I want to see the head of the family." Magistrate Wu was a frequent visitor to the Zhu family. When the concierge saw him, he immediately led him to the house. After a while, Magistrate Wu looked at a middle-aged man and said in a panic, "Master, Wu is really in trouble this time. For some reason, the official from the Ministry of Civil Affairs is targeting me everywhere. If he takes the exam, the results were submitted to the Ministry of Personnel, and I, the magistrate of Ding'an County, will no longer be able to serve as the magistrate of Ding'an County no matter what." "Why are you panicking?" The middle-aged man glanced at him lightly and asked, "Have you ever offended him in any way?" To say he was offended, he just said a few harsh words to that person's colleagues. He couldn't be the reincarnation of a stingy man because this matter was targeted at him, right? Magistrate Wu bit his head and said, "Wu swears, absolutely not. I have been respectful to them from beginning to end. There is not even the slightest offense, let alone offending." He looked at the middle-aged man and asked tentatively, "Is he here for the Zhu family?" The middle-aged man glanced at him and said, "I know about this. You can go back and wait for the news. Whether he can live in peace this time depends on whether the Zhu family is willing to take action." Magistrate Wu bowed his hands to him anxiously and said, "Then I'll go back first." After Magistrate Wu left, a man came out from behind the screen, looked at the head of the Zhu family, and asked, "Brother, do you think this person is here for our Zhu family?" "I don't know." The head of the Zhu family shook his head and said, "This person does things without any rules. He just entered Jiangnan East Road. Maybe he wants to establish his authority." The man thought for a while and then asked, "Does Magistrate Wu care about his affairs?" "No matter," the head of the Zhu family said, "the Zhu family is already in danger, and we can't control that much anymore." The man frowned and said, "If Magistrate Wu is really removed, won't the resources that the Zhu family has invested in him over the years be wasted? With Magistrate Wu gone, we just need to recruit another one." The head of the Zhu family looked at him, sighed softly, and said, "Don't always attach too much importance to those things that have been lost. These things will never come back. If you can't even figure this out, how can I safely leave the Zhu family to you?" The man's expression changed. "Brother, you..." The head of the Zhu family waved his hand and said, "Don't ruin the Zhu family's century-old foundation because of me. Tang Ning has stayed in Kuzhu for 2 days, but has not received the news he expected. The Kuzhu Zhu family is still the same Kuzhu Zhu family. It seems that whether Magistrate Wu has something to do has nothing to do with them at all, and they have not expressed any expression about it. People say that those who strike first gain the upper hand, and those who strike later often lose the opportunity, but this is often not the case. The one who strikes first will also reveal his flaws first. When a master fights against an opponent, whoever strikes first will lose the force first and will most likely be the one who loses in the end. If the Zhu family didn't take action, Tang Ning couldn't bring people up and ransack the house without any explanation. After all, a person must be reasonable. The governor of Kuzhu came in from outside with a helpless expression and said, "If the Zhu family doesn't take the bait, what else can Mr. Tang do?" Tang Ning thought for a while and said, "How about Governor Sun invite the heads of several major families to have a meal together? Governor Sun hesitated and said, I have never had any contact with them. This seems a bit too abrupt. Tang Ning said, the three major families contribute so much tax money to Kuzhu every year. As a parent official, isn't it normal for Mr. Sun to entertain them with a banquet to show his gratitude? Governor Sun thought for a moment and said, I'll give it a try. Thinking of something, he suddenly said, however, the banquet was supposed to be for the four major families, not the Zhu family and the other three families. In terms of the tax money contributed to Kuzhu every year, the Xiao family is more than the three Zhu families combined. It's just that the Xiao family, the master of the house, is away and there is only a steward in the house, so we can only invite those three families first. Tang Ning looked at him and asked doubtfully, didn't Master Sun say that there are only three major families that control Kuzhu? Governor Sun said, Master Tang, you don't know that the Zhu family and three other families have a history of hundreds of years in Kuzhu. The Xiao family just moved here nearly 10 years ago and started in business. It took less than 10 years to become the business has become the largest in Kuzhu, and the Zhu family, the Huang family, and the Dong family all have extensive business relationships with the Xiao family. Tang Ning nodded. It seemed that the Xiao family was quite capable in business. When he checked Kuzhu's taxes, he discovered that the largest taxpayer in Kuzhu was the Xiao family. Speaking of taxes, Tang Ning looked at Governor Sun and said, Master Sun, I've had Kuzhu's taxes checked, and there doesn't seem to be any major problems. Governor Sun smiled and said, don't worry, Mr. Tang. I'm the tightest on the taxation issue. Even these four major families have nothing to do with taxation. There are no tax loopholes in Kuzhu, which means that Tang Ning cannot be fined with silver. If he cannot be fined with silver, he will not be able to complete the quota given to him by Chen Huang. If he cannot meet the quota, how will he pay the tax when he returns? Tang Ning looked at the governor of Kuzhu and sighed, Master Sun, this can't be done. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 579. Chapter 576 of the main text of the Ruyi Little Man, the chickens and dogs are restless. The governor of Kuzhu looked at Tang Ning and asked uncertainly, there is no problem, isn't it okay? The governor of Kuzhu is also a good comrade in the organization, but until now, he is only a governor who has been sent abroad and cannot stay in the capital to enjoy the blessings because he cannot figure out the emperor's thoughts. Emperor Chen was a pragmatic emperor. His thoughts were simple. It didn't matter whether there were any tax problems in Jiangnan. What mattered was whether he could get money. He thought that managing Kuzhu well would please Emperor Chen, but his idea was still too naive. If Kuzhu could raise 10 million taels of tax money and transport it to the capital, he might be transferred to the capital next year. It is difficult to talk about this matter openly. Tang Ning waved her hand and said, if there is no problem, forget it. Being able to eliminate the rebels is also a great achievement. The governor of Kuzhu nodded and said, I will invite them to the banquet when I get back. After Governor Sun left, Tang Ning carefully studied the four major families in Kuzhu. The three major families, Zhu, Huang, and Dong, have been rooted in Kuzhu for at least 100 years. The family is prosperous and is the well-deserved leader of Kuzhu. The three major families have been in Kuzhu for a long time. Over the years, they have not done anything harmful to nature or oppressed the people. They are quite popular among the people and have always cooperated well with the government. The Xiao family moved to Kuzhu more than 10 years ago. They started as a business and expanded very quickly. In less than 10 years, the business was larger than the three major families of Zhu, Huang, and Dong combined. What is strange is that during the expansion of the Xiao family's business, the three major families also contributed a lot, and even took the initiative to give up their own market to help the Xiao family. This allowed the Xiao family to expand in such a short period of time. Within a short period of time, he became the richest man in Kuzhu. Businessmen pursue profit. Tang Ning doesn't believe that the three major families are so selfless, benefiting themselves and others at the expense of themselves, and sacrificing themselves to benefit others. Generally speaking, families will not last for hundreds of years. In addition, the name of the Xiao family is also somewhat meaningful. Xiao is the surname of the Liang kingdom, and the king of Guizhou whom Bai Jin is loyal to is naturally also surnamed Xiao. They have stayed in Jiangnan for so long and have done nothing but wait for the Liang kingdom to return to its own country. Tang Ning will definitely not believe it. Lianguo, Gushu, the Xiao family, the three major families who suddenly obeyed, he connected these things together, and one clue became clear. In order to confirm his guess, it was necessary to meet people from these three major families. Blessings to the family. The Zhu family is one of the three major families in Guizhou, and the head of the family is naturally aloof. Even the governor of Guizhou has to give him a bit of a thumbs down. But at this moment, the high-ranking head of the Zhu family did not have any majesty as the head of the family. He huddled on the ground in pain, the veins on his forehead popped out, and big beads of sweat rolled down his forehead, looking extremely painful. He grabbed his own neck and hissed, kill me quickly." A man stood beside him, turned around and said hurriedly, "Medicine, get the medicine quickly." The head of the Zhu family staggered to his feet and said sternly, "Kill me." "Brother," the man grabbed his shoulders and said loudly, "If you die, what will happen to the Zhu family?" The head of the Zhu family had a ferocious look on his face, and he suddenly broke away from his hand, rushed to the side, and pulled out a long knife from the waist of a Zhu family guard. The guard's expression changed, and he was about to stop him, but he kicked him away. The head of the family took out the long sword and placed it across his neck. The man looked at him and said in fear, "Stop him quickly." Several guards had reacted long ago, swarmed up, snatched the long knife from his hand, and pinned him to the ground. "Here comes the medicine." A servant of the Zhu family ran in from outside, holding a porcelain bottle in his hand. The man snatched the porcelain bottle, opened it, poured out a brown pill, pinched the head of the Zhu family's mouth, and forced him to eat it. After a while, the head of the Zhu family finally settled down, and the two guards immediately helped him up and sat on a chair. The head of the Zhu family leaned back on the chair, as if he had exhausted all his strength. The man hurriedly picked up the teacup and gave him a few sips of tea. The head of the Zhu family felt his chest rise and fall for a moment before asking in a hoarse voice, "How many pills are left?" "There is one more," the man said. "Brother, don't worry, they will send it to you soon." "Brother, you can't give up. Even if you commit suicide, they will find another person in the Zhu family. Then let's fight them to the death." The head of the Zhu family stood up on his chair, and his voice suddenly became sharp. "If the Zhu family continues like this, even if we are not destroyed in their hands, the court will not let us go. Guizhou is the Zhu family's Guizhou, even if I die, they won't be able to survive." He coughed twice and said, "What they want to do is to rebel. The Zhu family can no longer be held hostage by them." The man looked hesitant and said, "However, if the Zhu family wants to fight them, they will suffer heavy losses. Even if the Xiao family in Guizhou is defeated, when the people from Runzhou come to find us, we will still be dead." The head of the Zhu family looked at him and said, "The Zhu family is not the only one in Guizhou." As soon as he finished speaking, another servant of the Zhu family walked in from the door, handed over an invitation, and said carefully, "Master, this is from the governor's office." The man next to the head of the Zhu family took the invitation, opened it, and said in surprise, "Okay, what kind of banquet will Governor's son host?" The head of the Zhu family looked at him and asked, "When, where, and who else was invited?" "It's tonight. In Tianxiang Tower, in addition to us, we also invited the Huang family and the Dong family." The man looked at him and asked, "I don't know what kind of medicine son's gourd sells." "Brother, we want do not go." Prince Sunday, the head of the Zhu family, thought for a moment and said, "Go. Tianxiang restaurant is the highest standard restaurant in Kuzhu. Tonight, the governor is hosting a banquet in the building for the heads of the three major families. Tianxiang restaurant has cleared out early and is waiting for the arrival of the most powerful guests in Kuzhu." When the head of the Zhu family arrived, there were already two people in room number 1 of Tianzi. One person looked up at him and said, "Brother Zhu is late tonight." The head of the Zhu family looked at him and asked, "Isn't Governor Sun here yet?" The man shook his head and said, "There is still a quarter of an hour before the agreed time, and Governor Sun will probably arrive later." The head of the Zhu family found a place to sit down and did not speak again. The atmosphere in the room gradually became quiet. After an unknown amount of time, the head of the Zhu family raised his head again, broke the calm, looked at the two of them, and asked, "Are you going to watch the Huang family and the Dong family being wiped out by the imperial court?" One person looked at him and said, "The Huang family will be annihilated by the imperial court in the future. Over the years, don't you understand that if you didn't follow them, the three major families would have been destroyed long ago? That's because the imperial court doesn't know their intentions yet," the head of the Zhu family said. "Once the imperial court knows that someone wants to rebel in Jiangnan, will it still remain indifferent?" The head of the Huang family looked at him and said, "Those movements were indeed caused by you on purpose and disturbed their affairs. Aren't you afraid that they will make you unable to live or die?" A cold look appeared on the face of the head of the Zhu family, and he said, "Then let's make a bet and see who dies first." He looked at the other two people and asked, "Do you dare to bet?" "What are you betting on?" Governor Sun walked in from the outside, looked at the three of them, and said with a smile, "It seems that the three of you are very interested tonight. What do the three family heads want to bet on? Can you bring me along?" Tang Ning looked at the group of people with a smile and asked, "Can you add me as well?" The three of them looked at him at the same time, then at Governor Sun, and asked, "Who is this?" Governor Sun looked at Tang Ning and introduced them one by one from left to right. "Master Tang, this is the head of the Zhu family, this is the head of the Huang family, this is the head of the Dong family." After saying that, he looked at a few people and introduced, "Let me introduce you to the three of you. This is Mr. Tang from the capital." Tang Ning looked at the three of them and said, "Tang Ning, the Tang of Tang poetry, the restless Ning of chickens and dogs. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 580. Chapter 577 of the text volume of Ruyi Little Man. Three families surrendered to Tang Ning. Tang poetry was written in Tang dynasty, and Ning was restless. It is not the peaceful Ning, nor the quiet Ning, but the restless Ning of chickens and dogs. This is a self-introduction that could not be more arrogant. The three masters have lived for decades and have seen countless arrogant people, but this is the first time they have seen such an arrogant and direct person. But this person's introduction is extremely true. Everywhere he goes in Jiangnan West Road, people will be panicked and chickens and dogs will be restless. Could it be that he has the same thoughts when he goes to Kuzhu this time? When they met for the first time, they used this method to give the three of them a showdown. The leader of the Huang family laughed and said, "Master Tang, you are joking." Governor Sun took the initiative to break the awkward situation, smooth things over, and said with a smile, "Master Tang just likes to joke. Everyone, please sit down." Tang Ning looked at Gong Sunying, who was standing aside. Gong Sunying looked away from the three of them and nodded slightly, which confirmed his guess. The three major families are not in the same spirit, and they have no close relationship with Governor Sunday. After everyone sat down and before the food and drinks were served, the head of the Huang family asked straight to the point, "I don't know if Governor Sun invited the three of me to come this time. What's important?" Upon hearing this, Governor's son looked at Tang Ning. When the three masters saw this, a strange look flashed in their eyes. Governor's son was the governor of a state, but he clearly regarded Mr. Tang from Beijing as his backbone. It seems that today's banquet will most likely be this Mr. Tang's idea. Naturally, he would not set up today's banquet for no reason. There is no good banquet. If this person suddenly invited them to a banquet, there would naturally be no benefit for them. However, they were not too worried. This was Ezhu. The governor of Ezhu hosted a banquet for 3 people with great fanfare, so he would not do anything at the banquet. Tang Ning looked at the 3 of them and said, I invited you 3 here today mainly because I want to talk to you about the Xiao family. When the word Xiao family was spoken, the expressions of the 3 people changed drastically. Tang Ning looked at the 3 of them and said, all 3 of you are big taxpayers in Kuzhu. I have checked your 3 families' taxes and there are no big problems. However, as one of the big families in Kuzhu, the Xiao family, the 3 of them are not enlightened, and what they did is not allowed by the court's legal principles. The head of the Huang family glanced at him and said, what does the Xiao family's affairs have to do with our 3 families? Master Wang's words are wrong. Tang Ning smiled and said, you still don't know whether the Xiao family's affairs have anything to do with you, or don't you know? The head of the Huang family frowned and asked, Master Tang, what do you mean? It's not interesting. Tang Ning waved her hand and said, I'm just curious. When the poison attacks each month, the 3 of you shouldn't feel very uncomfortable, right? As soon as these words came out, Governor's son's face showed some doubts, but the heads of the Zhu family, Huang family, and Dong family suddenly stood up, their expressions changed drastically. The head of the Huang family looked at him and asked in horror, who are you? Tang Ning looked calm and continued, the feeling of being poisoned is uncomfortable, and the feeling of being controlled by someone as a puppet should be even worse, right? Seeing that Tang Ning not only knew about Gu magic, but also knew that they were being controlled, the head of the Huang family could no longer maintain his initial calmness. He looked at Governor's son and said, Master son, this master is talking nonsense. Huang doesn't know that he is here. What do you mean? The Huang family still has something to do, so Huang will leave first. The shadow left by those people in his heart is lingering. If something goes wrong here, what awaits him will be torture worse than death. After saying a word, he walked out quickly. Tang Ning did not stop the head of the Huang family. After he walked out, he looked at the remaining 2 people and asked, the head of the Huang family has left. Do you 2 want to leave? The head of the Zhu family looked at him, thought for a while, and suddenly asked, can this poison be cured? Tang Ning glanced at Gong Sun Ying, who took out a porcelain bottle from his sleeve and threw it to him. After the head of the Zhu family took it, he poured out a red pill from the bottle and said, grind the pill into powder, cut a wound on your arm, and apply the powder on it. The head of the Zhu family's eyes stayed on her body, and there was a trace of hesitation on his face, but it was only for a moment. He took out a dagger from his arms, made a wound on his arm, crushed the pills, and applied the powder on it. Not long after, under the gaze of the head of the Dong family, several black bugs crawled out of the wounds on the head of the Zhu family, fell to the ground, and became motionless. Thinking that this kind of thing had been tormenting him, the head of the Dong family felt a chill in his heart. After shuddering, he immediately looked at Tang Ning and said, the Xiao family wants to use the 3 major families to incite public opinion and gain the support of the people of Kuzhu's support, they want to rebel. Tang Ning looked at him and continued to ask, who is the head of the Xiao family? The head of the Dong family said, he is very mysterious. Kuzhu is just one of their strongholds. I have only seen him once in the past 10 years. I don't know who he is, but there are many capable people and strangers around him. They will drive all kinds of insects. The head of the Zhu family stepped on the Gu insect corpse on the ground and said, I remember, they seem to call him His Highness. Tang Ning looked at him and asked, His Royal Highness King Qian. The head of the Dong family immediately said, yes, it is His Royal Highness King Qian. Hearing the word King of Kazhu, Gong Sunying frowned slightly and his expression suddenly became nervous. Tang Ning looked at the two and asked, you told me all this, aren't you afraid of them? The head of the Zhu family said, since the adults already know everything, do we have any choice? Going against the court will not end well. The head of the Zhu family still has some sense, unlike the head of the Huang family just now, who stood on the wrong side and contributed an indicator to him. Tang Ning sighed a little. The chaos in Jiangnan was indeed caused by them. Will he stand on the opposite side of Sumei soon? He already knew what he wanted to know, and the next thing was left to the governor's son. The influence of the three major families in Kuzhu is extraordinary. With their help, it is easy to destroy the Xiao family. If it weren't for the poison, any of them would have the strength to destroy the Xiao family in Kuzhu. I heard that the Xiao family in Kuzhu is just one of their bases. They have several such bases in the east of Jiangnan. Tang Ning suddenly felt that he didn't have to worry about the indicator problem anymore. The purpose of today was not to eat. After seeing those disgusting bugs and the bloody arms of the two family heads, no appetite was left. Tang Ning handed the mess to governor's son to clean up, and returned to the post station first. In the room, governor's son looked at the two and said, please pay more attention to the Huang family. If they stand with the Xiao family, we will have many unnecessary losses. The head of the Zhu family looked at him and nodded, don't worry, Lord Sun, as long as the poison can be cured, he knows what to do. A moment later, the Huang family. The head of the Huang family looked at the two of them and said in surprise, what, the poison in your body has been cured? The head of the Dong family looked at him and said, after you left, Lord Tang gave us the antidote. Do you still plan to stand with the Xiao family? Only a ghost would want to stand with them. The head of the Huang family looked anxious and immediately ran out the door, saying, I will go to Lord Tang to ask for the antidote. The head of the Dong family stopped him, took out a porcelain bottle and handed it to him, saying, I brought you the antidote. Thank you, brother Dong. The head of the Huang family showed gratitude on his face, immediately opened the porcelain bottle, and swallowed a red pill directly from the bottle. Grind the pill into powder and put it on your arm. The head of the Dong family stopped talking halfway. The head of the Huang family took a gulp of tea, then looked at him and asked in surprise, what did brother Dong just say? The head of the Dong family looked at him in a daze and said, grind the pills into powder, cut a wound on the arm, and apply the powder, this is how to use the antidote. Late at night, at the door of Kuzhu Post Station, a man knelt in front of the door and said in a shrill voice, Master Tang, I was wrong, Master Tang, please open the door. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 581. Chapter 578 of the main text of Mr. Ruyi, Keep Blowing. Inside the inn, Tang Ning, who had fallen asleep, got up again. She looked at the head of the Huang family who was kneeling on the ground with runny nose and tears. She shook her head and said, excuse me, there are only 3 pills, so if you waste them, they will be gone. When he wanted to leave, he left right away. Tang Ning gave him a chance, but he missed that opportunity. He didn't want the antidote, he could get it if he wanted it. He patted the head of the Huang family 3 times on the shoulder and sighed, Master Huang, just take care of yourself. The head of the Huang family's voice trembled, Master Tang, I was wrong, I was really wrong, please give me another chance. But when he looked up, all he faced was the closed door. The head of the Huang family walked back in despair. The head of the Dong family looked at him and asked, how is it? Did you get the antidote? Seeing his dazed expression, the head of the Zhu family said, based on his performance at the banquet just now, if I were Mr. Tang, even if I had the antidote, I wouldn't want to give it to him. The head of the Huang family looked at the head of the Dong family, and suddenly seemed to remember something. His eyes flickered and he said, "You said that when the antidote is stained with blood, those bugs come out of the body. When you use the antidote, there is also something in the blood antidote. How about each of you give me a bowl of blood?" The head of the Dong family looked at his wolf-like eyes, shuddered, and said, "This method will definitely not work." "How will you know if you don't try?" The last life-saving straw. How could the head of the Huang family give up? Turned around and shouted, "Come here, bring a knife." "Wait a minute." The head of the Zhu family stepped forward and said, "You said, Mr. Tang just patted you 3 times on the shoulder." The head of the Huang family looked at him and asked, "Why do you ask this?" The head of the Zhu family thought for a while and said, "This may be your only chance." The head of the Huang family showed a hint of excitement on his face and asked, "How do you say this?" Tang Ning woke up, finished washing, and when she walked out of the room, she saw someone moving large boxes into the yard. He was stunned and asked, "What are you doing?" The head of the Huang family ran over and said with a smile, "Master Tang, when the common people learned that war was about to break out in the north, they were worried about the world and couldn't sleep at night." Tang Ning looked at him and said, "Tell me the important point." The head of the Huang family said seriously, "The common people are willing to donate 3 million taels of silver to the national treasury to serve as military pay. I hope Lord Tang will accept it on behalf of the imperial court and your majesty." Tang Ning looked at him with a smile on her face and said, "The Huang family master is determined." The head of the Huang family said, "This is what ordinary people should do. Everyone is responsible for the rise and fall of the world. It would be great if everyone could think like Master Huang." Tang Ning glanced at him approvingly, rummaged in her sleeves, took out a small bottle, threw it to him, and said, "Ah, why is there an antidote here? Since the Huang family master is so caring, this antidote will be given to you." The head of the Huang family bowed to the end and said excitedly, "Thank you, Lord Tang." Huang family. The head of the Huang family looked at the insect corpses on the ground and said angrily, "Get my knife, I will cut their corpses into thousands of pieces, crush their bones and spread ashes." 3 million taels was not a small sum for the Huang family. At this moment, he vented all the resentment in his heart on these insect corpses. Of course, he was also complaining about the heads of the Zhu family and the Dong family. If they could have helped him at that time, the Huang family would not have lost such a large sum of money. The head of the Dong family said, "If you lose money and avoid disaster, the Xiao family has caused the Huang family to lose more than 3 million taels in these years." The head of the Huang family chopped up the insect corpses on the ground, then raised his head and asked, "What should we do next?" The head of the Zhu family said, "Having been a slave of the Xiao family for so long, is it time to ask for some interest from them?" The head of the Huang family asked, "Can we fight them?" The head of the Zhu family asked, "Can they fight against the imperial court?" Yes. The head of the Huang family nodded and said, "After all these years, you, surnamed Zhu, are still so insidious. If the Xiao family wants to rebel, the court will not let them go." The head of the Dong family thought of something, looked at him, and asked, "You just went to ask for the antidote. What else did Master Tang say?" The head of the Huang family thought for a while and said, "Master Tang said that every man is responsible for the rise and fall of a country. Nowadays, there are grasslands in the north that repeatedly invade the border, and the western regions in the west are eyeing them. The people of Chen State should have money and strength to contribute, like us. Big businessmen, it is best to donate some money to reduce the pressure on the treasury. The more you donate, the better. If you don't donate, you are not a Chen Quarren." When Tang Ning woke up in the morning, the Huang family sent 3 million taels of silver. When she woke up in the afternoon, the Zhu family and the Dong family each sent another 1 million taels. In this way, Kuzhu's target has been achieved, and it has been greatly exceeded. It seems that the heads of the three major families are all sentimental people, and they deeply understand that everyone is responsible for the rise and fall of the world. As for the remaining Xiao family, there is no need for him to rush to take action. The three major families have been oppressed for many years, and they may not be able to bear it any longer. Cuz who, Xiao Mansion. The master of Xiao Mansion is away. In the past 10 years, everything in Xiao Mansion has been taken care of by the housekeeper. A servant hurried in and shouted, "Butler Zhang, it's not good, it's not good." Butler Zhang had just made tea and the tea was still cold. He raised his head, frowned and glanced at the servant who walked in, and said, "You are in a hurry. If you have something to do, please speak slowly." The servant gasped and said, "All the merchants in Kuzhu City, big and small, have cancelled their cooperation with us." "What?" Butler Zhang slammed the table, stood up, and asked, "Where are the three major families? What do they do for a living?" The servant said, "This incident was provoked by the three major families." Butler Zhang was stunned, with a trace of disbelief on his face, and blurted out, "Impossible, are they crazy? Do they want to die?" The servant said in panic, "Butler Zhang, we are in trouble this time." "What trouble?" Butler Zhang snorted coldly and said, "I don't believe that they can withstand the pain of the poisonous insects gnawing at their hearts. If they don't suffer a little, they won't know how to be obedient." Zhu family. Butler Zhang walked to the door, looked at the gatehouse of Zhu Mansion, and said, "Let Zhu Xiong come out to see me." The gatehouse glanced at him and said, "The master of the family is meeting guests, please wait for a moment, Butler Zhang." Butler Zhang said angrily, "Asshole, don't you know who I am?" After that, he walked past the gatehouse and walked into the Zhu family. The servants of the Zhu family stepped forward to stop them, but were scolded by him. They were obviously a little afraid of Zhang Guanjia and did not dare to really stop him. The head of the Zhu family heard the commotion, walked out of the room, looked at Zhang Guanjia in the yard, and asked, "Why is Zhang Guanjia so angry?" Guanjia looked straight at him and asked coldly, "Mr. Zhu, do you want to rebel?" The head of the Zhu family looked at him and smiled, "Rebellion, isn't this the thief crying thief? It seems that you really have a different mind." Guanjia Zhang took out a bamboo flute from his sleeve, looked at him, and said, "I hope you can still laugh later." As soon as he finished speaking, he put the bamboo flute to his mouth and played it. The sound of the flute was short and long, intermittent. Guanjia Zhang narrowed his eyes and looked at the head of the Zhu family, and the head of the Zhu family looked at him quietly. Seeing the calm face of the head of the Zhu family, Guanjia Zhang's face showed a trace of doubt, took a deep breath, and the sound of the flute became more and more urgent. After a while, he felt a little dizzy from playing the flute, put down the flute, and looked at the head of the Zhu family in shock. The head of the Zhu family looked at him and said indifferently, "Keep playing, why don't you play?"